Hi, I'm Jack Cambria, and you're watching the Crisis Cop podcast on the Two Guys Talking Podcast Network.
Jack Cambria would spend 34 years in the New York City Police Department. 16 of those years was with the Emergency Services Unit. What Jack didn't know is he would be more renowned for what he would do for the Crisis Negotiation team and take over that unit for the next 14 years of his career. In fact, he would be the longest serving commander of that unit. Today, Jack's going to share his stories and insights with what he learned throughout his career. So please join us for the Crisis Cop podcast. Welcome to the Crisis Cop podcast. I'm Pat Doering, the host, the Crisis Cop, and today we're joined by an actual living legend in the world of the hostage crisis negotiation community, Mr. Gentleman Jack Cambria. Jack spent over 34 years in the New York City Police Department and was the longest serving commander of the hostage negotiation team, as they refer to as HNT number 5. Jack, welcome to the program.
And good morning, my dear friend Pat. And thank you so much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to say hello to you and all of your guests.
All right, Jack, so let's get started. Tell us a little bit about your career and how you got into the world of crisis hostage negotiations.
Well, Pat, as you mentioned, I served 34 years with the New York City Police Department, and it was a flash in the pan. In fact, when I came time for me to retire, I said, let it all go, you know. So in the NYPD, on your 63rd birthday, you must be retired. So I left about 6 months before that. So I kind of left on my terms, you know, my way of thinking about it, at least. But my career chronology is very easy, actually, to put on paper. So I worked on patrol when I first came onto the job in a Brooklyn precinct, 72nd precinct. And after several years doing that, I applied for the Emergency Service Unit, which is our version of the SWAT team. We don't call it SWAT because it's not just SWAT. It's the tactical branch of the New York City Police Department, but it's also a rescue unit as well. So thus far, we call it service. So you will go from one job in a tactical application with the guns and the vests and the helmets, the battering rams, to take somebody out in an arrest situation, to the very next assignment, and maybe climbing the girder of a bridge, trying to rescue somebody, from themselves who might be contemplating suicide. So it's a multi-function type of unit. So that's why we call it service, emergency service. Mm-hmm. From emergency service, I got promoted then to the rank of sergeant, and I had to go back now to the precinct, which was the 72nd precinct once again in Brooklyn. And I did about 3 years there as a sergeant. And then I was invited back to come into emergency service once again as a sergeant. Did 9 years in emergency service as a sergeant, then got promoted to the rank of lieutenant and had to go back to a precinct again, 72nd precinct in Brooklyn, yeah. And no accident, by the way.
Yeah.
So the phone call is alive and well when you need it sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
When you're deserving of it, I think. And then I was invited back into emergency service as a lieutenant. So, again, it's very easy to put on paper. Mm-hmm. I did, as a lieutenant, almost 3 years. And then my final one assignment that I was on with the former commander of the hostage negotiation team, a man by the name of Hugh McGowan. He was very instrumental in my career in this realm of it, where when I first applied for emergency service as a young police officer, he was the lieutenant in emergency service who interviewed me and gave me the nod, so I was able to come into emergency service. Now, fast forward, I'm a lieutenant, and I happened to be on one assignment, and he happened to be there. I was on most of the jobs that I was on. The lieutenant was there as well with the negotiators, and I was on the door, and I had a success in having that individual come out to us. So we, the tactical team, did not have to go in to this hostile environment, right?
Right.
And when the job was over, he approached me. He said, Jack, I'm going to be retiring very soon, and I'd like to leave the team in a good place. And I've always saw over the years that you bought into the principles of negotiation, and I'd like to recommend you for the position. Might you be interested? I wasn't sure. I was having a grand old time in emergency service. I loved the tactical work. I loved the rescue work, climbing bridges all over the city, right? And I got paid for it at the same time, right? So I asked him if I can get back to him, and I did in a few days. And I thought, okay, yeah, please submit my name. But if it didn't work out, I'm still in the emergency service, right? So anyway, the long and short of it, he did submit my name, and in time I was interviewed, and finally I did get the position. And then I became the commander of the hostage negotiation team. So I got that position just 5 weeks before the attack of the World Trade Center. So it was late July of 2001. And then forward 5 weeks later or so, the attack on the World Trade Center. So now I'm temporarily assigned back into emergency service. Mm-hmm. So I was, back what we called on the pile in the World Trade Center disaster for a 3-month period. And then at the end of December, finally things started to wind down a little bit. The first week, as you remember, was the rescue mission. Right. Although the last person pulled out alive was on September the 12th. And that was a police sergeant from the Port Authority Police named John McCormick. And then 1 week later, it became a recovery mission. And, and not much was really recovered at the time, just small body parts. If you think about it, the fires that were burning at the World Trade Center, they were at some 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah. Cremation takes place at 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. So what remains were left. A lot of it were cremated remains, and that's what we're pretty much walking on the pile. But anyway, just to finish up that story, then at the end of December, I got back into the position. And then, as you mentioned, I wound up being, and I still hold the record through today, being the longest tenured commander of the team at 14 years. Although the new guy is a young guy, so he might be in time.
Yeah. Right. So obviously, Hugh is one of your mentors. Anybody else that you would consider kind of a mentor in the field of negotiations for you?
No, I like to say, Pat, I have learned from the best of the best. I have learned from cops who can walk into a very chaotic situation and automatically just make things better by the words they chose, their professional, presentation, appearance. Conversely, I have learned from cops who can enter into the scene of the Blessed Nativity and cause a riot, right? Right. Start handing out summonses for loitering, right? Oh my gosh. But those are my mentors as well, because I've learned from them also of what not to do. So I thank them also as my teachers. But there were so many, and I was fortunate that, and I think you might know this, Pat, that the NYPD has some bragging rights and that it established the very first hostage negotiation team in the entire world.
Right.
And back in 1973, after a series of different incidents. And I'm still in touch to this day, as a matter of fact, with the founding fathers of the hostage negotiation team, Captain Frank Bowles, who you would know, no doubt. He was H&T 1. And then Harvey Schlossberg, Dr. Harvey Schlossberg, also Detective Harvey Schlossberg, who just passed, going on about 2 years now. Yeah. And these are also my mentors and my teachers. And they kind of brought me in, and they accepted me, and they gave me all their lessons and their training, which I now would turn around and give to the current negotiators when I was still doing what I was doing.
Right. Mm. Yeah, I think that's one of the unique things I found in the world of negotiations is we share almost everything. It's a little bit different than some policing, I guess you want to say, niches or whatever, that to where sometimes people get some training and they want to keep that to themselves and not share that and make themselves better, I guess, make themselves more valuable. Whereas in the negotiation community, the amount of sharing and camaraderie we have, I think, second to none. And I think that's what makes it such a good discipline in law enforcement.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And, I do a lot of, still, as we already kind of alluded to, I do a lot of training around the country currently still, even internationally, Europe and Israel and all of that. And I do a couple of different types of trainings. My main genre, of course, is the hostage negotiation training. But I do, another training called verbal de-escalation, crisis communication. And this class is more designed for first line responders, police officers, on patrol who are answering 911 calls. And in this class, half of the class is there because they're on the high civilian complaint earners list,
Right. Yeah.
And they just want to check the box that they're getting additional training.
Right.
The other half, they kind of want to be there. That's a little more difficult class to do because they don't really want to be there. Half the class is, and they're like doing this, like when I'm getting out of here.
Right.
But with the negotiators, they want to be there, to your point. And
Right.
they want to learn all they can about this discipline. And I even tell them, I said, it's I do 2 separate classes: the basic class for new negotiators and the advanced class, just like you, Pat. And I tell them on the first day of the first class that of the basic class, this can very easily be a 2-month class without any stretch of the imagination at all, because there's so much information,
Right.
But we have to confine it. You and I as instructors have to confine it to what we believe are maybe the most essential parts in the beginning. And then it's an ongoing process, because negotiations can be a perishable skill, if you're not constantly training in it,
Right. Yeah,
So
definitely. So taking back, you said, you spent some time on ESU. So this question is going to kind of delve into that. So when have you found as a negotiator, it's time to maybe have the tactical guys step in and do some of the stuff they do, and you just kind of learn, okay, we've been talking, it doesn't seem that negotiation.
Well, I think
go ahead.
Yeah, I think, Pat, it's kind of intuitive, or you kind of know instinctively when it's time to make that transition. So if the subject is not showing a cooperative spirit when you're trying to negotiate with them, if communication can not be established or maintained over a period of time, if the level of their emotional state intensifies or stays in that upper state, if they are dehumanizing hostages, treating them with the disdain and really disrespect,
right,
over the top kind of, and obviously if they harm or they even kill a hostage, that it's time to go. Of course, the incident commander will make that decision. So for your viewers who might not understand the concept of the incident commander, it's the highest ranking member usually that's on the scene at the time of that police organization. But if I may suggest that the true incident commander is not that police incident commander, the highest rank, but probably that subject on the other side of that door.
Right.
They are the true incident commander. So they will determine the resolution of this incident and how it will play out by their level of cooperation or lack of. So if they're cooperating with the effort, they're talking to us, that's an easy one for the police incident commander to kind of decide, let's continue negotiating.
Right.
The opposite is true as well. If they start hurting people, harming people, killing people, well, that subject made the determination how this will be resolved by a tactical resolution. The police incident commander will just be the spokesperson of that and will give that directive. But it's truly, I believe, the subject on the other side of the door, that's the true incident commander.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's something, especially in law enforcement, it's hard for us to sometimes fathom, is that we don't have a lot of control in these situations, and that person inside has the majority of the control. And I think that's what we learn through, in negotiations, is at the end of the day, it's kind of their decisions. We can hopefully make them sway towards the decision we want, but sometimes it doesn't work that way.
That's right. Yeah. So, everybody's going to kind of know when it's time to make that transition and just, sorry, we have to go tactical at this point,
Right. So you've done a lot of, I'd say, jumper scenarios, people, high element stuff. How does body language play into some of those incidents? Because I know that's a key, obviously when you're on the phone, you don't have that body language thing, but when you're doing those face-to-face negotiations, how difficult is that, controlling your body language or picking up on the person's body language?
Yeah. So we use what we call nonverbal minimal encourages. So minimal encourages are, those they're short little words, sounds, phrases when you're listening to somebody to show that you're paying attention. So, for example, oh, really, Pat? Okay. And makes that individual understand that you're paying attention, and it encourages them in a minimal way to continue speaking. But you don't really have that in face-to-face negotiations sometimes. And so there are a couple different ways we use nonverbal minimal encourages. So by looking the individual in the eye, as to show you're paying attention if they're talking to you, nodding in the affirmative, so they understand that you are paying attention to them. Effective pauses, which are silence, just to indicate that more is expected from them.
Right.
Those are very powerful nonverbal minimal encourages. And if I can just add also on jumper jobs, for example, on face-to-face negotiations, oftentimes what I've found through my experience in doing this, when I'd be a coach to the primary negotiator, and then I would want to coach him or her, you can't really pass notes at that point. Usually in a knock, negotiation operations center, we'll pass little notes. But that's not really practical on a face-to-face. So what I found out through experience, when I'd be whispering in my primary negotiator's ear, trying to coach,
right,
the subject would then take exception to that. What are you saying? Are you plotting against me? Are you speaking about me? So what I've learned to do then, instead of speaking them, whispering in their ear, I now go behind them, and they can't see me anymore while I'm whispering in the ear of the primary coaching. And at the same time, holding on to his or her belt.
Right.
So if that subject tries to jump, instinctively, some police officer is going to try to lunge for that person.
Right.
It's just human nature.
Right.
No. Come on back. Can't do that.
Right.
So those are little, tricks that I've learned, again, through experience and through trial and error. That didn't work. Let me try something else. And that seems to have been very effective.
Yeah, and you brought up an important aspect of the team concept, especially in face-to-face, is having that coach there, having that, extra set of ears. And then, like you said, the creep, we call it kind of the creep factor, because our human nature is we want to help that person, right? So we tend to creep too much to, maybe if I could just grab them, right? One of those things. It's important to have that coach there to kind of, like you said, pull them back and, hey, no, right? So a lot of times I think people just think of, it's a negotiator, there's just that one person, and they kind of miss that whole team concept that we use.
Yeah. And I also teach, Pat, pay attention to your face when negotiating with somebody on a face-to-face negotiation. The little eye movements, the rolling of the eyes,
right.
It shows your attitude and how you feel about this. So keep those little gestures in your pocket and don't reveal them. And on the opposite side, again, to your point, you can read that person's face as well. When you're talking to them, they give you like the eye roll. They might think you're not being credible with them, so you might have to fix that a little bit.
Right.
So it's important on both sides to pay attention to the face and the body gestures, as you had asked about. So
I know what's the call number or volume NYPD per month, like 40 something call outs, probably something.
Yeah, interesting. So we averaged when I was doing it, and another interesting side note to that. But when I was still doing what I was doing, and I'm retired 9 years now, but when I was doing it, we were averaging 45 assignments per month, and those are the different types of responses. Right. So there was the hostage situations, which are mostly domestic in nature, and believe it or not, that was a smaller number per month. Mm-hmm. Then we had the barricades, and there was two categories of barricades. There was the barricaded perpetrator, the criminal that needed to be arrested. There was an arrest warrant, and I'm not coming out.
Right.
I'm not going back to jail. I'll shoot it out with the cops before I come out. So enter the hostage negotiator to talk to them. We're going to talk to you. Then the second category of barricades, of course, are the emotionally disturbed or the mentally ill who are no longer responsible for their actions. So now they need police intervention. The police must become responsible for them. So again, enter the negotiator, and we're going to talk to you, try to get you out of that hostile situation. And then the third category response are those jumpers that you just mentioned about, those face-to-face, either on a rooftop of a high-rise building in New York City or on the girder of a bridge. So we're going to negotiate with them as well, to try to rearrange their thinking process from what they want it to be to what we want it to be.
So all those hundreds of probably calls you've been on, was there any ones that stood out that?
Yeah. Well, just to that point, if I can make one more point on that. So I told you when I was doing it was 45 per month. So I'm very friendly with the current commander of the hostage negotiation team. And I asked him that question just recently. Mike Tomeo, his name is.
Right, yeah.
I said, Mike, how many jobs are you doing per month? And he told me 65 per month. And I said, yeah. And I said, really? Yeah. And he said, yeah, since the George Floyd incident, ever since then, now ESU is calling for the negotiators a lot quicker, and a lot more often with that. And just to get some context to that number, because I, like you, Pat, we teach around the country. And the average team across the U.S. responds to maybe between 8 and 12 per year. Mm-hmm. So we're doing now 65 per month, which is, insane. So And as the commander, I got notified for every single one of those, 45 at my time. And that included like at least a dozen times, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Mm.
What do you got? What's going on? So,
Right.
okay, I'm sorry, please.
Yeah. So going back, any one of those that stood out to where maybe you didn't think the outcome was going to be what you thought, and maybe good or bad, that just kind of stood out to you?
Yeah, well, there's so many, Pat, as you can imagine, but one that particularly stands out is a lady named Olga. Olga was at the time a 45-year-old Polish woman who had just found out that her husband was looking to leave her for a younger woman. This puts her into a tailspin, mostly speaking, downward. She drives a car to the midspan of the Kosciuszko Bridge. It's the bridge that links the borough of Brooklyn to the borough of Queens along the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. She abandons the car. She climbs over the railing, and she's holding onto a communication cable, looking down at the water 150 feet below. And when I first got there, I tried talking to her. She's just not acknowledging me at all. And she's looking down. She's practicing in her mind, I think, at least what she's looking to do.
Right.
So at that point, I have 2 negotiators with me, and I send them into her car that she abandoned. See if you can find any information about her. Her name, go into her glove compartment, see what you can find out.
Mm-hmm.
And while they're in her car, her cell phone that she left on the front seat starts to ring. So being detectives, they pick up the call, and it winds up being her husband. So they alert the husband to what's going on. And the husband's horrified by what he hears. He goes, "I'm coming right now. I'm about 30 minutes away." The detective said, "Sir, before you come, we have to ask you some questions." And they start to interview him. Mm-hmm. And they find out about the marriage, that's on the rocks, and that they have 2 young children, a 12-year-old daughter named Maria and a 14-year-old son named Thomas. So they come back, they feed me this information, her name, about the marital situation, and about the children. So then I say to her, "Olga, don't forget she's not talking to me at this point." And I'm thinking, she's a good candidate for jumping because she's not responding.
Right.
I was concerned. And I said to her, "Olga," now she knows I know her name. And the first time she kind of looks at me, "How do you know my name?" Well, she didn't say that, but that was the demeanor. I said, "I understand that you're having some marital difficulties." Because how do you know that? First time she spoke to me. I said, "Well, we just spoke to your husband on your phone, your cell phone that you left on the front seat of your car." Mm-hmm. And she says to me, "That's bullshit. You could not have used my phone. My phone has a passcode. You could not have used my phone." I said, No, Olga. I sent my detectives into your car. We wanted to find out who you are. And while they were in your car, your phone rang, and it was your husband. And he's very upset about what we just told him, about what you're doing right now. In fact, he's coming here. He's on his way right now." Then she softened a little bit. She looked at me. She goes, "Oh, he's coming here?" I says, "Yes, he is. He's very concerned. And he also told us that you have 2 young children, Maria, 12 years old, and Thomas, 14. Olga, Maria, 12 years old. Very soon, if she has not already, she's going to be entering into puberty. And that's a very scary time for a young girl." I remember when my daughter was that age, right? A lot of drama going on at the time, right? And that's something only a mother should be there to support her daughter with, to teach her daughter about. Yes, it's true. Anyone can do that, but something only a mother should do. And what about Thomas? 14 years old. If you do this, jump. Is he going to bear that burden for the rest of his life, that maybe it's his fault in some way? Maybe you yelled at him last week for not doing his homework. He's going to bear that burden for the rest of his life. Finally, it was that point she starts now making eye contact with me. I said, "Olga, this is what we're going to do. When you're ready, I'm going to ask you just to hold on to that cable. We're going to come down and help escort you over onto the roadway. I want to get you some help. Your husband will be here by that time, and you can talk with your husband." I finally got her to agree to come to that point, and we get onto the roadway. So in that case, I wasn't sure how that was going to go. Mm-hmm. I was concerned. But finally, by staying in there with the process, finally we got it to agree to come to the over to the side of on the roadway. So yeah.
And again, it just points us back to that incident commander. That was Olga's decision, and thankfully she made the right decision, right?
She did, thank God. So hopefully they went on to fix their marital woes and move on in their lives and raise their children. So.
Yeah, and again, and unfortunately, sometimes they don't play that way. And again, that's that person's decision. And speaking on that, how difficult is that? You being the commander of the team when one of your negotiators or yourself handles one of those when that person makes that decision to take their own life. Not an easy thing to deal with.
Yeah, and that's when we do some soul searching. And there's been some, with all the, probably been involved with my 14 years in doing that. And I'm just talking about the hostage team. I'm not even talking about negotiating on the emergency service side of it, because you're the first responder. You're the first ones on the door before the negotiators arrive. But just on the hostage negotiation side, probably in my 14 years, either negotiated or responded to over 5,000 negotiations. So, of course, there were numerous incidents that did go bad. And mostly, and I shouldn't say numerous, but there was a fair amount of situations that did not go the way we wanted it to. And that was mostly in the area of suicides, suicidal individuals, if they were still standing, and we got a chance to negotiate with them. And then finally, they made a decision, and that decision was to not live my life anymore. I'm just so distraught. And despite our very best efforts as negotiators, staying within our training, what we know has been effective in the past, they made a decision in their lives. So with that, Pat, we do a lot of soul searching. We debrief that on the scene, and then we get back into the police headquarters, and we'll sit around a round table, all those that were involved with the incident. Did we do anything wrong? Could we have done anything better? And we kind of go around the table with that. And if we decide that, maybe we could have tried this, maybe we could try that, we then incorporate that into future negotiation. So I like to say, Pat, that because we've been doing it longer than everybody else, as the first team to establish a negotiation team, we've probably gotten it wrong more than everybody else, because we've been doing it longer than everybody else.
Right.
But by getting it wrong more than anybody else, we probably now maybe get it right more than everybody else, because hopefully we learn from our past mistakes and can move forward.
Right. And what's good about that is all the negotiators can learn from past mistakes, right? So it's key of sharing our not necessarily the same mistakes, but sometimes maybe we did something that we could have done differently.
Yeah.
Right. And then passing that along to other negotiators. So maybe in the back of their minds, I remember seeing a case Jack did that this came up. He said, maybe try it this way. So we're hopefully preventing future occurrences by training what we learned didn't work.
Yeah. And the thing is, you never really know. You just don't know what's going to work, you know, and
Absolutely.
what might work with one person might not be effective with the next. You don't know.
Absolutely.
So, but I think failure, if we want to call it that, failure is oftentimes a pathway to success, because the greater the failure, hopefully the greater the life lesson you've experienced, and then you can move on, you know. So we all make mistakes, no doubt, but those mistakes should not define us for who we are, but they should rather teach us.
Right.
So we can move on and hopefully make things better for the next person that we come in contact with.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go ahead. Let's make a little bit, kind of talking down here. Let's bring it up a little bit. Was there anything that a certain case or something that looking back, maybe at the time or even looking back, you thought, that was actually kind of a funny incident that we dealt with, and we're glad it turned out this way, or something to that aspect?
Yeah. Well, there's been so many. One case that I'm not sure it was so funny, but it was a fascinating case study where we had a detective named Michael Ahern that was taken hostage in his precinct station house. This is in Midtown Manhattan, the 19th precinct, by an individual who he brings in. There was a cross complaint between this individual and his estranged wife. They had complaints against each other. And he had the task of trying to decipher it and see if there's an arrest warranted or to be referred to court. So first he interviews the wife, and the wife seemed a little bit out there. Like she was all over the place, right? Mm-hmm. So he's kind of thinking now, well, maybe it's her. But then he calls this individual into the station house, and he wasn't under arrest. He was just there to be interviewed. And he seemed very cooperative. And it winds up, he's got some issues going on, this guy. And as the detective is interviewing him, what he does, he has a gun secreted in his waistband. He pulls out the gun, he grabs the detective by the tie, and he puts the gun to his head. And this is now where the whole thing begins. So he's claiming that he was an undercover operative for the CIA, and the government is now trying to do him wrong, and he wants to expose the CIA and the government. So kind of out there. The detectives at the time, they did call the CIA, and of course, no, we don't know this guy. They disavowed any knowledge of him, even if they did know him. No, we don't know this guy, right? Yeah. So we couldn't verify that aspect of it. But interesting case with this guy. He was in the Israeli military, and very proficient in the safe handling of firearms. So, because at one point I asked him, I said, his name was Adrian Libovici. I said, Adrian, can you just remove the gun from the detective's head? You can keep it close by, but just remove it from his head. We're concerned about an accidental discharge. Then we're going to have a real tragedy. And he says, don't you worry about accidental discharge. I was in the Israeli military. I am very proficient in the safe handling of firearms. The only way this gun will go off is if I physically pull the trigger. Be that as it may, Adrian, please. So he humored me, and he moved it from here to here, right? And that actually became a factor in get it resolved 5 hours later. It was a 5.5 hour negotiation. So at the end of he was making certain demands. He wanted documents retrieved from his apartment in Queens to prove what he's saying about the CIA, And we sent some police officers to his apartment. We got those documents that he was speaking about, and we met those demands. And he had agreed early on, if we meet his demands, then the detective will be let go, and he'll surrender. So after we met those demands, now he's looking to change those demands. Now he's telling us that his wife's got marijuana. It wasn't legal at the time, on her table in the bedroom, the night table, and he wants her arrested. Then we had to say no. I said no to him. Never say no just to hear yourself say no, but give the courtesy of an explanation if you have to say no.
Right. Yeah.
I said no, Adrian, we can't do that. Right now it's 2:00 in the morning. We're not going to go arrest your wife. We'll take that complaint and we'll follow up on it later on, but not right now. Then he wanted a lot of his documents were written in Hebrew. Now he wanted at 2:00 in the morning a Hebrew translator to come to read these other documents.
Yeah. So
I had to say no again. No, Adrian, we are not able to find a Hebrew translator at 2:00 in the morning. We have your documents. We're going to follow up with the investigation tomorrow morning when we can get somebody here to translate those for us. And finally, came up and said to him, Adrian, didn't you tell us 5 hours ago that you were in the Israeli military? He goes, yes, I did. He's very proud of that, as you should be. Well, then that would be suggestive, wouldn't it, that you're an honorable man? Because after all, the Israeli military wouldn't have somebody who's not an honorable person. Do you agree with that statement? He goes, yes, I do. Well, then honorable people do not look to change agreements once they made them. You told us 5 hours ago, if we met these demands that you made, and we did, that you would release the detective. And he hesitated for about 10 seconds. He says, you're right. He removes the magazine from the weapon, unchambers the round, puts it on the table. He disassembles, there's a 9mm, disassembles it, puts it all on the table, 3-4 parts. And he goes, okay, Michael, you can get up now and arrest me. So that's when the emergency service went blasting through the door. Yeah. And, interesting case with that, Pat. So ESU had never fired through, the one-way mirror in the interrogation room. Mm-hmm. They have never fired through that glass. It's tempered glass, it's treated glass, so you can see one way and not the other. And they did not know how the bullet would react on that bullet because we had two snipers set up on the other side of the glass in case they had to take the shot. So what they did, very interesting, was at the same time they had another ESU team go to another precinct and remove the glass, and they were bringing it to the outdoor range up in the Bronx to shoot through it to see how it reacted. But they never got that far with it before we got him to come out. But they had two shooters, and they were both aiming at Adrian, and they were going to do a countdown method. 3, 2, and then on 1, both snipers would fire simultaneously, with the idea being one of those rounds would hit that window a millimeter set before the second one, shattering the glass, and therefore the second round would have a free path to Adrian.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting. I thought that they thought about that.
Yeah, definitely.
It didn't happen. Thankfully, we were able to negotiate the individual out. So yeah,
definitely interesting case study there.
Yeah, indeed.
Let's go ahead and now's a good time to take a break from the podcast. So let's go ahead and take a break, and we'll be back to the Crisis Cop podcast.
Okay, thank you.
Thought about a career in voiceover? Need a great, cost-effective on-hold message for your organization or business? Don't know where to start? Check out The Voice Farm, your one-stop shop for voiceover needs. Check it out now by accessing The Voice Farm at voicefarmers.com and see what difference can be made with a company that is truly outside the box. From the Voice Box, voicefarmers.com. That's voicefarmers.com.
Wouldn't it be cool if your advertising could last forever? It can with perpetual advertising. Here's how it works. Unlike TV or radio ads, where every instance the ads are broadcast, they're only played once and lost forever. Perpetual advertising could have repeat exposure and replayability weeks, months, and even years after they're inserted in a podcast. So even if a podcast is a few years old, your ads will still be impactful to repeat listeners, as well as new listeners. This gives your advertising dollar the most bang for the buck. Find out more about perpetual advertising at twoguystalking.com/sponsors.
Have you got a cool voice? Do you like to act? Are you quick when it comes to thinking on your feet? Want to help propel the future of training crisis negotiators across the globe and foster the future of law enforcement? We need you. It doesn't matter what you look like. Doesn't matter where you're from. Doesn't matter what's on your plate. We want your voice to help us evolve the way that law enforcement interacts and succeeds when it comes to crisis negotiation. Ready to get started? Access BlueBaggersProject.com and start your role-playing voice adventure today. BlueBaggersProject.com. That's BlueBaggersProject.com.
All right, welcome back to the Crisis Cop podcast. Joining us today is Jack Cambria. And Jack, we were talking about a project you've been working with Gary Nesner and Andy. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you and Gary got together?
Sure, yeah. So, Icons of Negotiations. It was an idea launched by Andy Prisco, if we know him. He's very much involved in Washington State in negotiations on a different level, on mediation, those kind of things. And he had an idea to bring Gary and myself together and do kind of a podcast kind of thing. It was a communication between Gary and I, and I was thrilled to do it for the sole reason of getting to work with Gary Nesner. Oh my gosh! Right. So Gary has been a long-time idol of mine. I've always admired him. I thought he was a very smart negotiator, and when I first met Gary, actually, it was in 2002. 2002, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police were holding a hostage conference in Vancouver, up in Canada. And they invited myself to come down, and I think more about speaking about the event of the last 3 months in New York City about the World Trade Center attack. And at the table I was sitting with was Gary Nesner, who I never met before. I didn't really know who he was at that point. So he comes up always being so gracious. He introduces himself, and he tells me, at that time, he was the unit chief of the FBI's Crisis Negotation Unit, as they call it. Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, as a side note, that's a more descriptive term of what we do as negotiators, crisis negotiations. Right. But because we were the first, and it was initially entitled by Frank Bowles, who we spoke about, hostage negotiation, and because it's part of our tradition, we kept that title. But Crisis Negotiation Unit, it's more descriptive term about what we do as negotiators. But anyway, Gary comes and introduces himself, and he was the unit chief, as I said, of the FBI at the time. And oh my gosh, really? So I started kind of doing research after the fact on Gary Nesner, and oh my gosh, this guy's done so much, Waco, Texas, and Ruby Ridge, and so many classic hostage events that they were involved with. And at the end of it, of that session at the conference, he goes, "Jack, I'm going to make you a FOG, F-O-G, a FOG." No, FOG. What's FOG? He goes, "Friend of Gary." And he shakes my hand. So every time I talk to him, I sign off with him on an email or something. Best regards, Jack, and in parentheses, FOG, F-O-G. So friend of Gary.
Great. So to talk a little bit more about that icons of influence, it's just you. It's basically just you and Gary sitting down talking negotiations, right?
Yeah, some principles. Again, incorporating some of the theory that we've worked with in negotiations. Gary would speak about a lot of his high-profile incidents and how the interaction between tactical teams and negotiation teams is critical. And in fact, he wrote a book. In fact, I happen to have it on my shelf here. I keep some certain books on my shelf. Let me just and you might know it. And I always like to promote my friends as well, Storing for Time.
Absolutely.
And in this book, Gary speaks about several different incidents that he was involved with, high-profile, newsworthy incidents. Again, one of them being Waco, Texas.
Right.
For those younger viewers who might not be familiar with Waco, it winds up being a 52-day event. It started out when the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, went to execute a search warrant where they had information that the leader there, David Koresh, and his followers were selling illegal firearms. And when they got there, they were expecting them, and a massive shootout ensues. 4 ATF agents were killed, and I think another 16 were injured, seriously injured, and shot. So they had to back out. Now, enter the FBI, starting to negotiate this incident along with the tactical team, and it winds up being a 52-day hostage event. And in the end, the FBI tactical team, they wind up going through the compound with the big barrier, the ram hooked up to the Bearcat, and then fires began, and a lot of finger pointing as to who started the fire. The FBI says they started the fire. The Brent Davidians, no, the FBI started the fire. But drone footage after the fact shows that there were multiple fires started throughout the compound. So it was then apparent that there was Brent Davidians that started the fire. But in the telling of the story, Gary points out there was a lot of infighting between the tactical team and the negotiation team. He's very candid in the book. That's why it's recommended reading, by the way. And he says that while they're trying to develop rapport with the Brent Davidians and mostly with David Koresh, at the same exact time, the tactical team is crushing their anti-vehicles with the tank, right? So he says, I guess we're able to establish rapport now, right? So those kind of concepts were brought out during this podcast, if you will, icons of influence, and about theory and tactics and what has worked in the past and what has not worked. I give some stories as well that have been positive and not. So interesting. Interesting viewing. I think
for sure. Yeah. So you brought up the point of tactical and negotiation work together. We like to say it's that parallel approach, right? Unfortunately, and I'm sure you've crossed it too, is there's these teams that just don't get along. They don't train with their tactical team. They don't. It's almost like they're not respected. And I think that's just going back in history and look at these incidents that go bad. That's usually the key is they're not training together. They're not getting along. They're not doing that parallel approach.
Yeah. Pat, I think, and I probably can speak about this on a qualitative, approach. The tactical teams, and I was part of that for 16 years, emergency service in 3 different ranks, right? So the tactical teams have a mindset that we're the Marines of the police department, and the Marines don't need any help. Thank you. We don't need negotiators. Thank you for coming. Go wait outside. We'll call if you need to, right? That's a wrong approach, of course, no doubt. And I think it's exemplified even more so. There's 2 different models of negotiation in the United States. So there's the East Coast model. That's what I operated under. That's where the negotiation team and the tactical team are 2 separate entities completely. We both have our own chain of command. We both answer to ultimately a 3-star chief, right? I, the chief of detectives, ESU, the chief of special operations division. And if it ever got to that point, which I never would allow it to, I'm a negotiator after all, right?
Right.
Then we can let the three-star chiefs battle out, right? They're making the big bucks. Then there's the West Coast model. And the West Coast model is where the hostage team is a subunit of the tactical team. So it's usually the tactical team commander, usually a lieutenant, mostly. They're the boss of the negotiation team. So it's they're a tactic. Negotiations are a tactic for that model. Special weapons and tactics. So the negotiators might be viewed as a tactic if they have to use that. And just by my way of thinking, if it works for those negotiators watching this yet, then so be it, right?
Right.
But my way of thinking about it, and I've seen it, and I've also heard it because I teach all over the country as well, that in a lot of instances, the tactical commander will say, okay, we're giving you 20 minutes to negotiate. If it doesn't work, we're going in.
Right.
And usually the negotiation team commander is a sergeant. So we're kind of very rank conscious in policing, are we not, right, Lieutenant?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
In fact, there was an incident, and I won't identify the city where it happened, where I was teaching. And on the third day, it was a Wednesday, all of a sudden everybody, it was just this one particular negotiation team's unit. That's all that was in the class, right? And on that Wednesday morning, everybody's cell phone starts ringing. So I know exactly what that is. They got a job.
Right.
But this is under that West Coast model. So the sergeant, who's the commander of the hostage team, comes to me and goes, Jack, listen, we got a job. We got to go. I said, well, yeah, of course. That's your priority. I said, I tell you what, if you get done early, I'm staying in a hotel just 10 minutes down the road. Give me a call. We'll come back and we'll finish today. Otherwise, I'll see you all tomorrow.
Right.
So as they finish packing up their gear, the sergeant comes back to me and goes, Jack, you want to take a ride with us? I said, really? Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
They even gave me a vest to wear, which I didn't have to wear. So I go with them. And then when I get there, the job is already probably 30, 40 minutes into it now. And the negotiator is already negotiating from their knock. It was like a bread truck type of vehicle. So I go in there. They had the speaker on so I can hear both sides of the communication. And at this point, the subject, he was barricaded by himself in his mom's house. And it's in a depressed area of this county, right? They were welfare recipients. And the subject, who was wanted for drug and weapons charges, he's very highly agitated, excited on the phone. This is bullshit. And the negotiator, probably within another 30 minutes, now about an hour into it, he's able to get the subject from here to maybe about here, where here being the bottom, right? Being calm. So he got his emotional states down significantly. About that time now, the lieutenant, the SWAT commander, Marine type, physically fit, buzz cut, he comes into the knock and he tells the sergeant, commander of the hostage team, 1 minute. I'm giving you 1 minute to get him out. Otherwise, I'm throwing gas into the location. Now, the sergeant, he becomes stressed.
Right.
Hey, lieutenant, we got him from here to here. I think we're going to be able to get him in a little bit more time.
Right.
1 minute. So now the negotiator hears this. He starts becoming stressed. Hey, guy, listen, you got to come out of there in 1 minute. They're going to put gas into your house. Now the guy who is here now becomes up here again, right? Right. He becomes stressed. 1 minute? I can't come out in 1 minute. I got no clothes on, he says. I got the door barricaded. So he goes, okay. Give me 3 minutes and I'll come out. Because you had to move the barricade. Right. Lieutenant hears this. And sure enough, Pat, he kept his word. Yeah. In 1 minute, he directs his guys to shoot gas through the glass, the window, the bedroom window where he was, shatters the glass, the canister erupts, and sure enough, he comes out. And sure enough, he was in his underwear. So he was telling the truth. Right. Now, important point to this. So I'm in their house, so I have to kind of, stay back a little bit. The lieutenant's rationale for doing that in 1 minute, because his sniper was across the way on a hot tar Florida sunroof baking for over 2 hours. So you really can't say that to me. After all, I did that work. Don't forget. Right. He is the emergency service. When I was a sergeant in the emergency service, one of the many hats I wore was that of a sniper team supervisor. So the answer to that is, Lieutenant, why you keep me people up there for 2 hours in the baking sun? You switched them off.
Right.
20 minutes on, 20 minutes off. Why you keep me there for 2 hours?
Yeah.
I think it was more of a excuse. They don't have a whole lot of work. They get a fair amount of work.
Yeah.
Maybe you wanted to get them on the job training. Like the dog, you're making the bite. That big cushion there, just so they have to practice, right? And another very interesting point. So what I teach is that the intel officer on the hostage team not only has to find out everything there is to know about the hostage, but also the hostage takers that's inside that location.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that hostage, he wasn't a hostage, if that barricaded subject, if he would have had COPD, breathing condition, and they threw gas into that location,
Mm-hmm.
they would have killed him.
Right.
No doubt, they would have killed him. And then talk about a drama. I know it can be a drama, right?
Right.
So the lieutenant didn't give the intel officer to check this guy out. His mother was outside the house. His mother was on the scene. Does your son have any medical conditions before we do anything with him? Drop gas or whatever? And she would have said, yeah, he's got COPD. Lieutenant, you can't be throwing gas in there.
Right.
You're gonna kill him, right? So there was none of that. So that's where the issue comes in, by my estimation, just by my estimation. And that's all it is. Regarding the East Coast model and the West Coast model, where on the East Coast model, where the two separate entities, you have more of a check and balance type of situation, whereas the West Coast model is just kind of the directive of the lieutenant.
Yeah. And what's really lost in this whole conversation too is the poor mom. It's her house, right? And,
Thank you.
And then once, and unfortunately, I know you've seen it. Once you put gas in a house, it's very difficult to make that house livable in the next, weeks, months, and the amount of damage it's done, and here she is. You already said she's economic
public assistance.
Right.
Yeah.
How is she going to, do with it? So I think it just takes us do our due diligence. Sometimes it is a last resort. We have to do that, but let us do our jobs. Like we said, I think we're like high 80s, 90% successful when negotiations are involved. Let us work. Yeah. And I think that's what usually comes down to it is, like you said, when they put that rush time on a negotiator, it's not feasible.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up, Pat, because she's on public assistance. She's got no money to pay for a decontamination company to come in, right? And as you said, that's going to be sometimes could be over a week before they get the whole thing decontaminated. She has to throw away all the sheets, all the blinds, the shades. She can't afford this. Yeah. So there's no regard for that as well. So anyway, but it was a good lesson, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about you've had the honor of doing some negotiations on movies and TV. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, what do you think the biggest misconceptions are? And I'm sure they always listen to what you say too, right, Jack? I mean,
well, no, they do not. They do not. So you might know that some of your viewers, if they care to know it, I did some consulting for about a 10-year period on and off because my friend was the actual consultant. I was an assistant, kind of, sort of, on the TV show Blue Bloods. Mm-hmm. In fact, I don't know if you can see it. My wall hanging. See that wall hanging? That round wall hanging? Uh-huh. That is from the set of Blue Bloods.
Oh, cool.
So when they just finished shooting now, filming just about maybe a month ago, and they disassembled the set. And this was on the set in the hallway when Commissioner would walk down the hallway in his police headquarters. Yeah. And they had the producers, because I was consulting with them for so long. In fact, they even let me do 3 speaking parts and 3 separate episodes. That's our logo.
That's awesome.
That they had on the wall, and they sent it to me. So I'm very honored. So I'm very proud to have it up on my wall there as a wall hanging. So, but misconceptions is, oftentimes, and I would tell Blue Bloods all the time, Donnie Wahlberg, our hero, who played Detective Danny Reagan. Yeah. Oftentimes we had several hostage situations going on the set. And he would put his gun down and he'd go in and talk to the guy, so, no, we don't do that. Right. In the movie Inside Man, if you remember that, with Denzel Washington, he played a hostage negotiator. In fact, the jacket that he's wearing in that movie is my jacket. I loaned it to the movie, when they were doing that. Same thing. He left his gun behind with his partner. He goes inside. No, we don't do that, Right. So those are some of the misconceptions in the movie, the Negotiator, starring Samuel L. Jackson, Kevin Spacey. That was an interesting concept because they had two negotiators pitted against each other. Right. One, the Samuel L. Jackson character, he was wrongly accused of something,
Mm.
So now he's got to make his point. So he holds hostages in order to get everybody's attention. And then Kevin Spacey was, Sabian. He was the
Right.
negotiator, the main guy. And now they're both going to negotiate against each other. So interesting concept. But then it went Hollywood. They had cars going through the air, bombs going off, and so again, not reality. So, but I have a hard time watching them. We don't do that,
Right,
so,
right,
But those are some of the misconceptions that it's Hollywood. They got to sell tickets, I guess, right, Pat?
right. Absolutely.
So they do what they got to do.
So, is there any show or movie you found that actually is a more true representation of what we do, or something you've seen?
Yeah, there's actually a couple of them. A couple of movies I like. There was Dog Day Afternoon. That's an older movie starring Al Pacino, based on an actual hostage event in Brooklyn, New York. Interesting side note, I was about 16 years old at the time that was going on, and that bank was about 4 blocks from my home in Brooklyn. I still live in Brooklyn now. And so I went down there to see behind, 3 or 4 blocks behind this police lines, but I kind of saw in the foreground all the stuff that was going on,
Yeah.
And then they make a movie about it. So that was when you watch the movie, it's pretty kind of true to life.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's one scene. If you remember the scene when they were coming out of, if anybody remembers it, when they're coming out of the bank, and that only happened a couple of times when we go from point A to point B. So they wanted to go to the Kennedy Airport,
Right. Mm-hmm.
because they wanted to get a plane to go to the Bahamas. That was the master plan of a guy named John Voidovich. He was the main robber. And when they go into the van, they show the FBI agent. He's got a gun hidden in the armrest where he's able to flip it down, retrieve the gun. He's got it now on his person. So I actually found that negotiator, the real life negotiator named Jim Murphy. I met him at a cop party or something one time, and I learned who he was because, oh my God. I said, would you be willing to come down and talk to my negotiators? I said, I can offer you lunch. I don't have a budget, but he was very kind to me. I'd love to do it. And the real story on that part is that the gun was underneath the floor mat.
Mm-hmm.
They did it on there when they brought the car up there. And this guy, John Voidovich, he checked everything else out, but he didn't think to check under the floor mat. They took a chance.
Yeah, right.
And so when he got into the car, Jim Murphy, when he got into the car, he kind of did one of these, and he was able to get the gun quickly and stick it in his waistband. So he had the gun the whole time. That was only one of the few differences between the event and the movie. Mm-hmm. So that was a pretty good one. Another one that's a true life event, Stockholm Syndrome. That's only a couple of years old, I think. Mm-hmm. Again, it shows where we got that term Stockholm Syndrome from, where the hostages develop adoration towards the hostage taker. Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty true to life one as well. So I would recommend both of those movies if anybody can get them. Right. I joke that you can get them. They're accessible, like an Amazon Prime or something.
Yeah.
Then it costs $2.99, and cops, right?
Oh yeah.
Deep pockets, short hands, $2.99.
That's too much.
I tease you.
So Jack, what advice would you give an aspiring someone who is interested in becoming a police negotiator or trying to get in that field? What would be some advice you would give them?
So to try to answer that question, because I always thought about this. When I first took over the team, and I went into the office, of the hostage negotiation team, that I took over from Lieutenant Hugh McGowan, who I mentioned, I went through the applications, and he had about 300 applications on file. He hadn't done a class in about 3 or 4 years up to that point, And what I noticed through going through these applications, that a lot of the candidates that were applying didn't have a whole lot of time on the job in the police department. Year, 2 years, 3 years. And although I thought that was admirable that they wanted to do this kind of work, but I always felt that negotiations took on a more mature role in policing, where you kind of got the cops and robbers syndrome, chasing people, the sirens, right, all that kind of out of your system. And now you're ready to kind of look to resolve crisis through your words before a tactical resolution does become available or an option, right? So I changed the criteria from just any amount of time on the job to you had to have at least 12 years on the job before you'd be seriously considered as a negotiator. And there's 2 reasons for that. First reason, that 12 years, particularly in New York City, 8.5 million population, populace. Add to that another 4 million people every single day coming to the city. So about 12.5 million people circling around New York City every single day. And with that amount of volume, the candidate would have a fair amount or a good amount of experience with policing. So they would know what people respond to in a positive way, in a negative way, by the things that's said in the past. Maybe I shouldn't say that again.
Right.
And so let me revisit what has worked in the past. So it gives that candidate an intuitive sense of what people respond to over this period of time. The second reason for that 12-year criteria, it will put the candidate in a certain age grouping, maybe 35 years or so, give or take a little bit. And probably at 35 years of life experience, one would know probably what it means to experience the emotion of love at one point in their life, to know what it means to have been hurt in love at one point in their life, to know what it means to know success, and perhaps most importantly, to know what it means to know failure. I think you have to know failure in life.
Right. Yeah.
So you can know success. I said it earlier. It's a pathway. I believe it's a pathway. Failure is a pathway to success. And I think with that foundation, it makes for a more mature team, more professional team. And so to answer your question, what advice would I look to give someone aspiring to become a negotiator? I think you have to have a strong sense of human dynamics, of what people might respond to who are in crisis. I ask the question on every class I do. The first morning, after we do our introductions, the first question I ask the class, who in this class has never had a problem in their life, does not know adversity? Please raise your hand. And of course, no one can raise their hand, right? Because we all know adversity. We all have problems in our life. And that question sets the tone for the rest of the week of training, and that knowing you too know adversity in your life, you will now be responding to someone who's going through a crisis in their life. And maybe now you can respond with some compassion, empathy. So I tell them, yes, you can have the words compassion and empathy in the same sentence as police work. In fact, I believe it's an essential component of that. So I think a candidate should have a strong understanding of human dynamics, what people do respond to, have the ability to listen, truly listen. You know, most people don't listen to reply. Most people listen to respond. Most people don't listen to understand, rather. Most people listen to reply. And that's not truly listening. Because when you're listening to just reply, you're listening to two voices at the same time. The voice of that person speaking to you and the voice in your mind thinking about the almighty rebuttal. And that's the hardest thing for any one person to do. Listen and understand two voices talking to you at the same time, right? Most people misunderstand the differences between listening and hearing. They are two very different things. So hearing, it's involuntary. It's passive. It just happens. So if you hear my ring tapping on my computer, you didn't mean to hear that. It just happened. It was passive. But listening, however, it's something that's proactive. It's voluntary, and you have to choose to participate in that process of listening. So it's kind of protected. It's like your cell phone, you have to put a passcode, or your computer, you have to put a passcode in order to gain access to the brain of the computer, of the phone. Same thing with people. You have to allow access to truly listen and then respond. So I think those are some of the abilities that the candidate looking to aspire to become a hostage negotiator, it's critical in order for them to understand.
So you spent 14 years as the commander. How do you think your leadership changed from that first year going into those last years? What were some things you learned, whether it be on the job or through different things you've encountered as far as how you changed or how you evolved your leadership style?
So when I first took over the team, Pat, this is again 2001, but then 3-month hiatus and with the World Trade Center, and then I got back in the end of December. So the team was already in place. It was diminished because the previous commander, Hugh McGowan, didn't do a class in a few years. So I had to start thinking about putting a team together, putting additional negotiators on the team. When I retired, I had 150 negotiators throughout the 5 boroughs. So I didn't know a lot of those negotiators. I came from a different world. I came from emergency service. This is the detective bureau. So it was kind of foreign to me, So I didn't really know them. And because it was all on me now, I had to make sure I knew, everybody. And I won't say I I certainly didn't micromanage, but I was a little more attentive to every job that kind of came out, I would go on, for two reasons. I wanted to learn, first of all,
Right.
about this concept. I mean, I've been negotiating for years at the door in emergency service, the first responders. Then when the negotiators would respond and get to the scene, then they'd take it over. So I wanted to kind of learn this craft intimately. And then the second reason I responded, because I wanted to observe these negotiators who I didn't know. And over time, then I started to, started doing classes. In fact, I think I did 9 classes in my 14 years of being there. Each class is about 35 people, thereabouts, right? So in the end, all of the negotiators on the team were now people that I had put onto the team. I selected. The other ones, the previous negotiators, except for maybe 1 or 2, had retired at this point. So I think once I got to know everybody on an intimate level, I started to relax around them, and I was able to delegate more often. So of those, when I was doing it, those 45 assignments per month, I wouldn't go on 45 assignments per month. It would depend on what they would tell me on the phone when they called me. So, for example, if they told me, we have this little old lady, didn't take a medication, won't open the door. I don't need to be there. I have trained negotiators to be there. In the very beginning, I'd be there. I wanted to observe and also to learn. All right. But if they told me something that there was an actual hostage situation going on, if there was a barricade with a gun or something that was newsworthy, then I would go to those. So out of those 45 per month, I'd get to maybe about 20, thereabouts, 20, 25 a month. All right. So I think just becoming more relaxed in how I kind of better showed my, my leadership qualities with these individuals. So they trusted me. I trusted them. Thus, the title you gave me in the beginning, that was my nickname, Gentleman Jack, because I treated everybody as gentlemen. In fact, it's funny, just a side note of that, Pat. Every Christmas, I'd get about 5 or 6 bottles of Gentleman Jack whiskey,
Oh, yeah.
I had a whole case full of Gentleman Jack whiskey, at the time when I retired. So, yeah, that's it.
So let's talk training. Obviously, we have to have a lot of training as negotiators. What's some good training, or you've already mentioned Gary's book, just different things negotiators can do to keep fresh and keep their skills sharpened? Well,
I think negotiation is a perishable skill, and it's something you really have to train on constantly. So the NCNA, the National Council of Negotiation Associations, for those of your viewers who might not be familiar with that, that's an association that was headed up by Gary Nesner back in the. Gary Nesner was the unit chief of the FBI from 1991, 92 to around 2002, 2003. And when he first took over that unit, the FBI's team, he saw that negotiators from throughout the country were kind of doing their own thing. They were responding to incidents, they're doing their own thing. There was no uniformity in their response. And he sought to do something about that. So what he did at the time, he called in 7 negotiation experts from around the country, and he tasked them with putting together what they believed was proper protocols for negotiation response, what they thought was appropriate. They went back to their respective commands. They got their people involved. And then 3 months later, they came back to Quantico, Virginia, FBI headquarters, and they hashed it all around. And they came up with a document, which is known as the National Recommendation Policies for Negotiators. And although it's not a legal document of any sort of the imagination, but it's the only document of its kind that does exist, that gives kind of recommendations of how negotiators should respond. So in fact, I even teach it in my class because they have to. I think the negotiators should know about it, because if a job goes into court of law and a civil litigation, they're probably going to be confronted with this document.
Right.
Officer, you familiar with this document? They have to say yes because they learned about it in school. Well, then why didn't you follow this national recommendation?
Right.
So it behooves them to kind of to know that. So I think that's part of it, that they have to kind of train constantly, because it is a perishable skill. So it's like your firearm. You have to train in the police department twice a year. You have to qualify with your firearm maybe twice a year. Right. And if you don't go 2 or 3 years in a row for whatever the reason, you've been sick, you're on vacation, whatever, you just can't go, right? Well, when you go and you finally get back 3 years later, you're still going to hit the target, no doubt, but maybe not exactly where you need to, maybe up here somewhere, right? Same with negotiations. I go into when I do the advanced class, and a lot of the students that I do in the advanced class were not my students in the basic class. So I don't really know what they got from the other instructors. And I'll ask them about active listening skills. Yeah. We know what it is. Tell me about it, right?
Yeah.
And they're hard pressed to maybe recite that, the More Pies acronym.
Right.
More Pies is an acronym that was developed by the FBI, for Negotiator to remember, their the different skill sets of active listening skills, which I believe is very important. It moves the negotiation along when you become involved with a stalemate. Right? I know you know this, Andy, just for your audience. Right? So you do have to practice. You have to train in this field. Otherwise, you'll lose your edge on it, like in the outdoor range when you're trying to qualify with your firearm. So.
Right. All right. So let's close this out, Jack. What do you think your legacy is going to be in the world of crisis negotiation, or what do you hope is your legacy in the world of crisis negotiation?
Well, I think what I hope my legacy might be, or my contribution to this field of negotiations, is to I guess it's based in the very core of successful negotiations, what has worked, what has not worked in the past, to try to understand and better support team members, and better support those people in crisis that we are negotiating with, to believe, I think, in this process, to just kind of have an understanding of what people might be going through. And in fact, with the emotionally disturbed, the mentally ill, the con, they become advocates for these individuals who are no longer responsible for their own actions. So now we, the police, must become responsible for them. And just to continue this process of moving forward, I probably trained, without an exaggeration, over the years between NYPD and then I do work privately for a private company, probably thousands of negotiators. And I hope to instill a confidence in them that they do make a difference. There was an individual, and you can help me with his name. He was the guardian of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Oh, yeah, Kevin Briggs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kevin Briggs. Kevin Briggs, I profile a story of Kevin that he was negotiating with a subject on the girder of the Golden Gate Bridge, 4 hours. And when he finally convinced him to come up onto the roadway with assistance from the police, and they're getting ready to put him in the ambulance to bring him to a hospital, he says to him, "I have to ask you, why didn't you jump?" And the subject said to him, "Because you just wouldn't give up on me." Powerful.
Absolutely.
Powerful stuff. So I say to the negotiators out there, don't ever think for a millisecond that what you do doesn't make a difference in people's lives, because I'm here to tell you that it does.
Yeah.
And thank you for what you do.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Jack. We appreciate you being on the show, and we look forward to keeping track of you around. Oh, you have something else?
One more point. I just want to show the audience what I have here. And there's 2 books by our friend Patrick.
Right,
here.
right.
And if I can show you something, look at this, folks. Give me half a second. There it is.
Oh, you even have that's even more
autograph book here.
Yes.
So if you get this book, and I recommend you do, please pay attention to chapter 1.
Chapter 1, yes.
Chapter 1. Let me just show it to you real fast. There it is right here. By yours truly. Okay.
Thanks, Jack. We appreciate
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick.
Appreciate you being on the show.
And thank you. Be well. Be safe out there, folks.